Matthew 12, verse 22, Reinterpreting demon-possessed and blindness through medical science. Throughout biblical history, physical afflictions such as blindness, disease, and mental illness have been attributed to various causes, including divine punishment, demonic possession, and fate. However, a closer examination of Scripture through the lens of medical science provides a more tangible and realistic understanding of these conditions. Instead of viewing blindness and illness as manifestations of supernatural forces, they can be understood as consequences of natural biological processes, particularly cellular decay and genetic predisposition. This perspective aligns with key biblical passages, including Matthew 12:22, Deuteronomy 28:28, and Exodus 4:11. Which describe blindness and affliction not as mystical curses, but as natural consequences woven into the human condition. Matthew 12, verse 22. The role of biological decay in disease, 22 states. Then one was brought to him who was demon-possessed, blind and mute, and he healed him, so that the blind and mute man both spoke and saw. In Matthew 12:22, the term demonizome, refers to being under the power of a distributor of fortunes or fate, which aligns with the ancient understanding of daimon as a force governing life circumstances. This suggests that what was described as demon possession in the scriptures can be understood as the natural consequences of genetic conditions, cellular decay, and environmental factors that determine a person's health and well-being, rather than an external spiritual entity. When viewed scientifically, the ailments attributed to demon possession in scripture often align with conditions now understood as neurological disorders, psychiatric illnesses, or genetic diseases. The blindness and muteness described in Matthew 12:22 could result from congenital defects, strokes, neurodegenerative diseases, or infections. These conditions, rather than being caused by external spirits, arise naturally through cellular aging, genetic mutations, and environmental factors. In this passage, Jesus' healing of the afflicted man does not necessarily imply the exorcism of an external entity, but rather the reversal of a physical impairment, restoring function to a person suffering from biological dysfunction. This understanding reframes demon possession as a term describing medical conditions beyond the comprehension of the ancient world, rather than literal spiritual beings. Deuteronomy 28:28, the curse of disease and mental affliction. Deuteronomy 28:28 warns of the consequences of disobedience to God's commandments. The Lord will strike you with madness and blindness and confusion of heart. NKJV. This passage, often interpreted as divine punishment, can also be understood as a prophetic warning about the natural consequences of societal and personal disorder. Rather than supernatural retribution, the afflictions listed, madness, blindness, and confusion, correspond to real diagnosable conditions. Madness, mental illness. Conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe anxiety can cause irrational behavior, hallucinations, and confusion. In ancient times, such afflictions were seen as curses or demonic attacks, yet they are now understood as neurological and psychological disorders. Blindness. Blindness can result from genetic conditions, malnutrition, infections, or degenerative diseases. The curse described in Deuteronomy 28:28 aligns with the natural consequences of poor health, environmental hardships, and lack of medical care. Confusion of heart, cognitive dysfunction. This could refer to neurological disorders such as dementia, which impairs memory and reasoning, leading to confusion and emotional instability. The Israelites would have understood these afflictions as tangible consequences of their actions, reinforcing the idea that disobedience leads to suffering, not through mystical means, but through societal collapse, disease, and poor living conditions. Exodus 4:11, God's sovereignty over human biology. In Exodus 4:11, God addresses Moses' doubts about his ability to speak. So the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord?" NKJV. This verse highlights God's control over human biology, not in the sense of arbitrarily inflicting disabilities, but as the creator of natural processes, including cellular aging and genetic variation. Rather than blaming blindness or muteness on demons, this passage acknowledges that such conditions are inherent in human nature. The phrase, Who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind suggests that disabilities are part of the human experience, governed by natural laws set in place by God. While some may interpret this passage as God directly causing disabilities, a scientific perspective sees it as a recognition that aging, disease, and genetic conditions are built into the framework of life. Cellular decay and the ancient concept of fate. The ancient Greeks understood daimon as a force that distributed fate, determining a person's life conditions. This concept aligns with modern biology, where hereditary diseases, genetic mutations, and cellular aging dictate much of a person's health. Cellular aging. Over time, cells lose their ability to divide and function properly, leading to conditions such as blindness, deafness, and neurodegenerative disorders. Genetic inheritance. Many conditions, from congenital blindness to epilepsy, are inherited through genetic mutations. Environmental factors. Poor nutrition, infections, and trauma contribute to diseases that were once attributed to supernatural causes. By recognizing these processes, we can reinterpret biblical descriptions of demon possession and divine curses as references to real-world afflictions rather than mystical events. Jesus as the healer of natural afflictions. Throughout his ministry, Jesus healed numerous individuals suffering from blindness, paralysis, and mental distress. Rather than performing exorcisms in the traditional sense, he was alleviating the burdens of disease, disability, and mental illness. Passages such as Luke 7:21-22, Jesus heals the blind and afflicted, fulfilling messianic prophecy. John 9:32-33, a man born blind is healed, demonstrating divine power over congenital conditions. Acts 10:38, Jesus is described as healing those oppressed by the devil, which can be understood as delivering people from the burdens of illness and suffering rather than from literal demonic entities. In this way, Jesus' miracles align with the natural restoration of health rather than the expulsion of supernatural beings. Conclusion. By reinterpreting biblical descriptions of blindness, madness, and possession through the framework of cellular aging and medical science, we move away from ancient supernatural explanations and toward an understanding of God as the creator of natural biological processes. The conditions described in Matthew 12:22, Deuteronomy 28:28, and Exodus 4:11 are not caused by external demonic entities, but are manifestations of aging, genetic inheritance, and environmental factors. Understanding these conditions through medical science allows us to see how ancient people made sense of suffering, while also appreciating the Bible's acknowledgement of the natural processes that govern human health. Jesus' role as a healer takes on deeper meaning, showing that his miracles were acts of restoring physical and mental well-being rather than battles against supernatural beings. Jesus' healings, therefore, should be seen as his power over the natural limitations of the human body, offering a glimpse into the future resurrection when these conditions will be overcome entirely. Instead of viewing diseases as spiritual curses, we can recognize them as part of the physical world